Puffy. And a lot of things for the last 10 or 15 years, roughly. And so he's here today to talk to you about what he does as a production manager with front of house mixer. And ladies and gentlemen, Chris Rabold.
Thanks, guys. That's pretty cool. I'm not used to being on the receiving end of the applause. I just wanted to say real quick, just in your announcement portion alone, that just shows me, this place is just teeming with opportunity. That's so cool to hear all these things that were just mentioned, even, the guy that came in and said, hey, we just need people to show up, because that's literally how it happened for me. Is just showing up. And I talked to Tom and to David about it. I was thinking what I'll do is I'm going to take 10, 12 minutes and give you the speed version of how I got from exactly where you are, 18-year-old Athens student to 34-year-old, still young, Athens resident with a little bit of success. And when I say speed version, because I'm going to have to talk fast to squeeze it all in. But in a nutshell, here goes. And this is not as a sort of a motivational speech, nor am I trying to, sell you on me. It's just I think it's very fitting, and I'm really excited to be here because it's super cool. Basically, for me, I went to high school in Chattanooga. I was real involved in sports. I never played in any bands. I could mess around on a few instruments or this and that, but I love music. When it came college time, really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I did know that I wanted to be near a lot of music. And obviously Athens is right down the road. I had always had this thing about Athens. When I went to summer camp as a kid, I traded a t-shirt for one of those Athens, Georgia shirts with all the acts on them. I was like 12 years old. I was like, I gotta get into this. I got REM and all these bands. So anyway, I knew I just had always been destined to come here. So I came to Athens and I was a landscape architect major. Just because why not, And so I came down here and I went to school, and I'll be honest with you, I passed, but I didn't really, I just was kind of over jumping through hoops. I just felt for it at that point in time, So I had a moment with the house I lived at, which is over on Bloomfield here in town, and I literally was laying there in bed and I wasn't feeling so high. And I thought to myself, if this is, we got to go through life. If I got 70 more years of this stuff, I've got to find something that's going to make me happy, that I'm going to do as my job. Because just like a lot of you guys, I've seen my parents and other folks older than me just toil through life, it's not real happy, And I didn't want to be that. And so I literally laid there in bed one day and said, I'm going to get in the music business. And that was it. I consider my first gig ever to be out here on Atlanta Highway. I don't know what it is, but it used to be called the Night Owl Lounge. It was like right up the road from Panera Bread. I had some friends that were in a band here in town, and I helped them push their gear through that door once. This is in 1994, and I consider that to be my first ever gig, and it lasted all of 20 minutes. I helped them push it in there. My skill set had been taken out. That was it. That was all I was capable of. So anyway, stuck around town, did not go to school the next quarter, was working at Rocky's Pizza, which is now Amici, and I was saving up my money. And for a few years, I had gotten into this band called Widespread Panic. And I was never into like the Grateful Dead stuff or any of that other this or that, but for whatever reason, that band was just something, whatever, it clicked for me, And I really liked them. And at that point in time, they were always playing everywhere, all over the place. And I had, so I saved up a little bit of money. I had some really cool parents, and I decided I was going to go see like two weeks worth of shows. And I got myself, my dog, and my station wagon. Just cruising around in my family's white Pontiac station wagon. And we hit the road and went to go see some shows. And I had a mutual friend who did merchandise for the band. And one night in South Bend, Indiana, it was in March, it was really cold up there. I went up and I talked to the guy, and he, I don't know what the deal was, but he said, hey, I'll be right back, will you watch this for a second? And of course I was like, yeah, So I sat there and I sold t-shirts for the rest of the night with this guy. And then when it was over, this was when Widespread had first moved into their first semi-truck. You know, they moved from their cars to vans to whatever, to a box truck to their first semi. So it was, you know, do you want to help us get out of here? And yeah, so anyway, it's the first time I ever stepped foot in a semi truck, and I helped them load out. And all I can say is, for whatever reason, with myself and that group of people, there was this instant connection. And even though at that time I was only 19 years old, I was eager enough and just not dumbass enough to be okay around older folks that were older than me. You know, I didn't get in the way too much. And we just really connected. So it became this thing. It wasn't a conscious effort so much as I swear it just happened, which is a lot of the times the way things work. For the next month or so, while their tour went on, I would follow around, and this eclipsed and went past my 2-week period. They would pay for my gas. I would take a driver room maybe after a show, you know, like a bus driver room. Once they checked out, I'd go there. A lot of times I slept in rest areas and just a lot of stupid stuff I never do now. And but anyway, that's what I did, you know. And we went all over the Northeast, and then it went out west. I mean, it's the best time of my life, to be honest with you. It was just like the open road, you know. It was just all that cheesy stuff, but it was real, you know. I was living it. So it got to the point to where I just could not stay out there anymore. Money and this and that, and even as much as they tried to take care of me, so I left. Came back a few weeks later, and lo and behold, the little bit of help that I had provided them, my absence was somewhat noticed. And it was suggested that, hey, why don't you come back, and on the next tour, you can jump on the bus. And we still can't pay you. And this time there was one band bus and one crew bus. We still can't pay you, but we'll continue to sort of take care of you, you know. So then again, you know, this is the most wonderful thing ever. You know, I was so happy. Jumped on that bus, went, did a tour with them, did everything from selling T-shirts to stocking coolers full of beer to breaking down the stage, even though I was more of a hindrance or help sometimes in that regard, to loading the truck. I was just really into that. That was my thing. I loved getting in there in all their gear and just slamming that truck full of gear. And I still have this weird twisted thing about packing trucks that I still kind of have to like. But anyway, so I went and I did that, and it was wonderful. I learned so much. And I'll tell you this, I learned a lot more about what not to do than what to do from watching others. And I still take that with me everywhere I go, and I still learn that every day, it seems like. When that was over, I went down to the Widespread office, which at that time was next to the Nowhere Bar, a little small place. And their manager sat me down and he said, Chris, we'd like to offer you a job. We only get a job. I don't even know what they thought I was going to do. I mean, I was just a kind of do whatever guy. And I said, well, you know what? The guy's name is Sam. I was like, Sam, I really want to get serious about audio. I really want to learn sound. And I'm going to go up to Nashville / Murfreesboro and go to school and get serious about this. And he laughed and said, well, call us when you fail out. You know, and it was handshakes and everything was cool, but I passed up on this dream opportunity because I wanted to really get serious about it. And I did. And I moved up there. Middle Tennessee State has the oldest 4-year degree in what you guys are doing now in this program. So I went up there, and if there is any formative part of my career upbringing or whatever, it was the Murfreesboro, Nashville years. And it's hard to sort of encapsulate that in 5 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. But basically, what I did when I got there is I went to school, and I got all the theory, and I learned how and why things worked. At the same time, I went out and I got involved, and that means in anything and in everything. And if you're sitting here right now, for instance, and you're listening to somebody who, you hear the job description and you think, we don't have anything in common, the one thing we do have in common is a lot of the principles that I think I apply to furthering myself are the same ones that you could apply in whatever you do. And that's just getting involved. If some dude walks in from a club, who cares what kind of club it is or what they do? You just get involved. And I did everything from hooked up with some guys, and I'd go run sound for their band. I had no idea what I was doing. I eventually worked my way into working at this club. I was the house guy there, had no idea what I was doing. I would work for all these different bands. I would go, I became a stagehand in Nashville. And you guys have that wonderful opportunity too, if you are interested in the live field. If you want to see what it's like what a show day is like, bam, 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 organized chaos, go to Atlanta and get involved with Crew One. That's something I would suggest. I did that whenever I promoted a show one time, had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I just stayed involved, and I kept showing up. So I had real world practicality, I had the school world theory, and I combined those two. I'd been in Nashville, I stayed in touch with Widespread the whole time. I'd been in Nashville for about 4 or 5 years, and I had resigned myself at that point to thinking that I would probably end up, and I was totally cool with this, I would probably end up working for a sound company out of Nashville and probably start out in country music. Because in Nashville, it was primarily like country and Christian and gospel and rock, which I'm interested in, was down near the bottom. Same with R&B, and at that point there was no hip hop in Nashville. Or if there was, it certainly didn't make it to any venues, of any size. I worked at a place called Soundcheck, and I don't know if you guys saw when there were all the floods in Nashville, one of the main places they showed was the Soundcheck Studios. And what it is essentially it's the country's largest rehearsal facility, but what they also do is they store gear there for artists, and they provide cartage for artists. And what cartage is just getting your gear within the city. There's a big studio scene still, which is very rare in Nashville. It would get the gear to and fro. Well, I worked there, and I was mainly one of the in-house engineers there. Again, starting there, I had no idea what I was doing. What was cool about that is I had the opportunity to kind of play Dennis the Menace to a lot of visiting engineers and production managers and whatever else, and I would just pick their brain. I try not to be too picky, but I would know who was coming in. I could look at the board and I could see, Donna Summer and Leonard Skinner, and then whatever country act du jour, Montgomery Gentry or whoever it is. But I would know who was coming in, and I would talk to them, and I would learn a lot. And I was also the weekend guy at this place. So I would go up there, and I would literally spend the night there. I would sleep on the couch with a packing blanket, and I would take stuff apart at night, whole rigs, take them apart, put them back together. I would go through all the rooms from where the big acts were rehearsing, and I would go over all their settings. I'll never forget going to Reba McEntire's one time when she was at the pinnacle of her career, and what she had was just huge. Going through all of it, And that was really big for me. That was really, really big for me. One of the things that I did this whole time during this learning phase, these years in Nashville, Murfreesboro, that I can't stress highly enough helped me. The first thing, like I said, is getting involved. The second thing is just reading. I was always reading trade mags, and what that did for me, and I still do. If I have 5 seconds to kill, I'm on my phone and I'm on a website learning about something. What that did was it gave me a lot of the words that were going on out there. Even if I didn't really know what was happening, I could sort of talk to talk in those situations. So there was a lot of fake it till you make it involved, but because I was always around it, and because I knew if someone was talking about it, I'd go home and I'd read about it, I'd find out what it was, So in a very condensed version, that's what happened. Schoolwork. I was sitting at home one day, I was really bumming, and I was like, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? It was one of those days where suddenly working for the country artist was not that cool of an idea. It's just, my phone rang, and there was a guy who, at that time, was the production manager for Widespread Panic. And we can get, you guys just ask me about what a production manager does later, I'll tell you. He said, Chris, I'm getting ready to leave. I'm going to move on and do something else. And with this band, it's more important that we bring in someone that they're familiar with. Are we doing time? All right. Someone they're familiar with versus just some big name that's going to come in and freak them out. So do you want to come here and be the production manager? Now keep in mind, I've never once sought to be a production manager. However, over the years, and some of you guys might know this if you have bands, there's always somebody in the band that's kind of maybe sort of making the plans for everybody, or maybe settling the show, or there might be some guy who's always involved with packing the van It's always the sound guy. There's just always somebody like that. I didn't try to, I just kind of always ended up being in that role. So I thought to myself, I really don't know much about production, but I seem to always make all this other stuff work. So I was terrified, but I said yes. So I came on back and just jumped both feet in, and I look back at some of the stuff that I did early on or thought was appropriate to have it. But I just, I was just learning as I went, and that's one thing for me. It's I'm lucky and I'm proud of what I did early on, but at the same time I was kind of spoiled because I got a pretty sweet gig at 24, But what happens when you get a gig at that age is a lot of times your mentors are limited because now you're on this peer level with them, and so it's a lot of make it up as you went along. The front of house guy that we had, I came in with huge plans. I cleaned house. It was always sort of assumed, Chris is going to be our sound guy, but I was like, I'm not ready yet. I've been doing clubs. Let me hire someone. Hired this guy, got him in there. Awesome engineer, fantastic. Attitude, questionable. Performance, fantastic. He left because he had some girlfriend health issues, something. The bottom line was the guy wanted to get out of there. And he just kind of wouldn't come back, and I'd say, hey man, your job's safe. He'd go, well, a lot of people would have fired me by now. Well, I just kept, sort of pushing me and I was young, and I'm like, oh, this is my guy, even though the guy kind of hated me because I was such a just punk, always on his butt, but wanting to learn too. Anyway, so through all of this, I ended up in the hot seat, and I was behind the console, and it was time, and lo and behold, everything worked out. And from that point forward, I just done both gigs with Widespread. I've done the production gig, and I've done the front of house gig. Just this front of house is, when you go to shows, there's a monitor mixer on stage mixing for the artist, and then there's the guy on the house mixing for the crowd, and that's what I do. Up until this last tour, however, which is 10 years, I finally said to the group, I can't do both jobs. It's just the gig's too big for someone to try to handle both. True to form, I thought I could, and I did for many years, but it just wore me out. I never, even when I came out on this thing, was 24/7, or I'd be out doing something audio related, or in the studio, or that, just too much. So I ended up hiring another guy to come in who used to be my stage manager. So now I wake up at 11 o'clock on show days. I'm one of the last guys in the building. I roll in there in flip-flops. I grab coffee. I stroll up to my console. I'm like the laziest dude out there. And it's awesome. I love it. But because I've been around the Panic Camp for so long, this is what I don't want to have happen. I'm trying to get away from this, but I'm kind of in this role now where they still call me for, I got a call yesterday. Could we do a show at blank? How bad was it? I'm trying to push this all off on the other guy, but I understand. It's just because I've been around for a while. And I've done these same roles for a number of other artists. And now I'm to the point where my career is starting to take a really crazy path that I never saw happen. So in a nutshell, that is how I got from where you are to wherever I am to where I am. So I don't know if you guys have any questions or what.
Well, I do. I think that because you've been in this front of house mixer production manager role for so long, what exactly does production manager do?
The production manager essentially has the big picture in mind, and I mean everything. When a show is booked, after the money is haggled out between the booking agent and the promoter, it then comes time to actually do the show. And there is a representative from both sides. There's the promoter rep, also sometimes called a production manager, but a promoter rep, and then there's the band's production manager. And those two parties, hopefully, work together to put on the show. And that means from the second you arrive to the second you're gone, let's plan this out so that it's mindless and easy. You start thinking, it's all logistics, it's labor, it's time frames, schedules, costs, working effectively within budgets, stuff like that. That's essentially the production manager's role. Weeks to months, depending on the size and scope of the gig. Outside of that, though, you begin the advance process. And in that process, you're advancing with the promoters for these shows, but you're also putting together crews, you're getting bids and quotes on sound, lighting, trucking, buses, catering, video, pyro, rigging, depending on the sort of act. Let's say pyro, I'm going to do pyro. Sometimes do. So anyway, you just kind of got the big picture in mind. And the way that we had set it up with Widespread Panic is, you also have a tour manager. On some acts, you're going to have 3 stage managers and 2 production managers, and it's just stupid. I mean, it's too many chefs, in the kitchen, too many cooks in the kitchen, and it just gets. But that's the way. Once you get a lot of money and a big act and a lot of egos, that's just kind of what happens. But the way we break it up is the tour manager handles travel, hotels, stuff like that, and I did handle everything else. So I'm more of a tech guy, so I don't want to be involved. I don't want to deal with getting planes. That's just not my thing, But that's a huge part of it. Travel is and there are companies out there that are, rock and roll travel agents. That's all they do, So anyway, basically, yeah, it's just having the big picture in mind. It's just putting everything together. It's people. It's dealing with a lot of people. It's very tiring. It's a lot of work.
So you were doing this, and I brought this back up today. I guess I don't know if it was in 2006 or 7 was the Asheville Christmas Jam.
Right.
Old Mean came out and shot,
Mm-hmm.
and you were, because we got on the phone like 50 times in several hours, but you were the production manager for that gig
Right.
at that point. And had you ever at that point worked in a situation where you were dealing with television, dealing with video at this point in time, a live show that was going to start when 7 o'clock and run?
I've done a lot of video. We had done, well, that gig is so unique. I had definitely done video and TV work at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But that gig is so different, and I'm doing it again. I've done it, I think it's like my 5th year to do it.
I thought you were crazy when I saw you do that.
Yeah, I was probably going 500 miles an hour, huh? They have an attitude?
No.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, probably yes and no, probably at that time, because so much of it is just make it up as you go.
Right.
But when you start getting into video and TV, a lot of that element, as you know, is like it's not super common as sound and lighting would be. So sometimes when it enters a tour or show or festival mode, sometimes it's not always super harmonious, and a lot of times there's some apprehension on both parts to work. So yeah, that gig's really, really tough because there's a ton of artists that it's not.
Right. What, just even in the scope of that thing, this is a show that I don't know if anybody has ever been to this thing before, but it happens. I mean, it's yearly at this point in time.
Right.
It's moved into the arena in Asheville. It's one of the most chaotic kinds of things that I've ever seen, because I think that one was supposed to begin at 8 o'clock. I had gone somewhere. We were in a motor truck, a level down and outside of the stage.
It's just so far from ideal.
Far, far away from wherever we were. And I had decided that, okay, we've got about an hour and a half. I'm going to go get some dinner. And I get a phone call at 7:04 that says Warren just walked out on stage, because I guess he had decided it was time for the show to start.
Right.
And I don't think that one ended until 4 or possibly 5 a.m., something like that, and it never stopped. People just walk on the stage. There were no breaks. There was not, okay, this band's going to play, that band's going to play. It was just this constant going on. And I thought you were crazy to have taken that on. It really
Well,
was. The 2 days of your life, essentially, two long days.
The thing with that one, and I consider that gig too to be like, and I'm still doing it now because I'm used to the Christmas money, to be honest with you. And because it's one of those gigs, and it's on a physical level, it sucks. It's in that old nasty arena, but it ends up being kind of fun for some strange reason. I don't know why. It's like sometimes over the worst gigs I've ever had have been the nights that I have laughed the hardest at the end. And I'm like, if this is as bad as my world gets, things are pretty good. What's tough about that gig is, in the production world, we run very, very, very structured worlds. This happens now, this happens now, this happens now. If it's a minute over, it's a minute late, and we have problems. What's rough on that gig is you're asking a production-minded person to put the production together, but the artist, in this case, Mr. Warren Haynes, he wants everyone to do whatever they want. So it leaves the production people in a position going, we're running 15 minutes behind, we're running 45 minutes behind, we're running an hour and a half. So on an ego level, you're just getting crushed, because it's like everything you do is just being made a mockery of. But once you step back and go, okay, this is the spirit of the event, this is super unique, and it's a benefit, and I'll be cool with it real quick, and I'll shut up on that. I'm doing it again this year, and I pretty much, like I said, have been on vacation lately because I haven't been doing any production work. First phone call I made was to Enact, and I talked to their production guy, and I explained to him, quite honestly, and he's sort of the name act on the bill this year. I explained to his production guy, look, I'm going to be honest with you, this is the way it works. Sometimes it's right on time, sometimes it's super late. And he immediately went into, he was very cool, but he immediately went into, well, I know you're probably not used to working with an artist of blah, blah, blah stature. And I'm like, oh, God. And we really need to tighten that ship up this year, And that's what I'm saying, that's why taking a gig like that's hard, because you have to suck it up and go, no, just forget everything you learned. And so I got off the phone, and instantly I was like, damn it, this is why I don't do this anymore, But then I mellowed out, and you know what? I know what that guy's doing. He's protecting his artist. He's simply doing his job. And he wasn't rude. He was rude, but he wasn't aggressive, and that's the game. But at the end of the day, you know what? He was just taking care of his artist, and I see where it's coming from. But yes, I feel every year I do it, I say never again, So it's one of those I just keep going back to. But it's a great cause.
How is that different from working with Lady Gaga or something like that?
That is true. That the way that when I'll tell you how you get from Widespread Panic to Lady Gaga is she obviously you guys know like this past year she just went from like pretty big to the biggest thing going. And they had brought in a new music director. Bands like Widespread Panic don't have music directors, and he didn't get along with their front of house engineer, who was Prince's engineer, so the two of those guys had words. The engineer quit. I get a phone call driving down Village, and it's, Chris, can you get on a plane and be here tonight? And I said, yeah, maybe. Who's the artist? He says, Lady Gaga. Yes, I can. So what happened was, it's not like they fired the guy and they went, I got it. This guy works for the perfect band for you. Widespread Panic. That's not it. What happened was they had to think of, okay, who do we know? Who knows this console, the particular one that they had? Who can come in here? Who's used to have a bunch of channels, a lot of inputs, because just like the band that I work for a lot, we've got a ton of stuff. So does an act like that, even more so. So anyway, and I was like the first guy to answer the phone. So anyway, I went up there, and the one thing I can say about when you get to an act like that is versus the stuff that I'm used to, is it's just the politics increase 1,000-fold. Very, very cunning, very, it's just different. It's just a lot more cutthroat. But at the same time, if you're like me, and I heard this phrase a long time ago, it's like, don't love the artist, love the art, if you do what I do. And I adhere to that, because I'm fortunate that I get to work with a band that I like. However, I enjoy the process of making it happen. I get a huge thrill out of making it happen, For me, primarily in the audio realm, but on on the production scope too, to sit back and go, wow, look at all this stuff, you know. So anyway, going there, we did rehearsals and we did we did Brit Awards, we did this and that, and then we went to Europe, did more rehearsals, and then I did a few shows. Then I handed it over to the other engineer, and the reason that he couldn't be there is because he was doing Beyonce. So here's me, stuck between Prince and Beyonce's engineer. And I'm like, you know, I just got my hair cut recently. This is kind of a longer haired dude with a beard. I mean, I was stuck out like a sore thumb, you know. But I did a really good job. I'm proud to say that, you know. And a production on that scale, for instance, and I've got to use this reference because it's the main thing I can reference. Widespread Panic is 3 trucks. A lot of times you hear people talk about acts, they'll go, well, how big a show is that? And they'll go, 12 trucks, 17 trucks, 6 trucks. We're 3 trucks. So in the grand scheme of things, Panic's right in the middle. It's a very healthy, solid tour organization. It's nothing extravagant, it's nothing little. Over there in Europe, and this was just starting up, she was at 38 trucks. I mean, it's just freaking massive, the amount of money being spent. I mean, absolutely absurd. And so really the thing that was different, once the music got going, I could mix the music no problem. It was just all the politics and all the attitudes and all the, you know, because people were so worried they're going to lose their gig. But the thing is, once you're up there, I think once you learn how to manage that, the politics and this and that, it's awesome because you're working with the best of the best. They're making a lot of money. I'm talking people working for me. They're making really good money. It's stable work. You know, when it's all said and done, you just work for the biggest artist in the world at that time. So it's really just, can you stomach dealing with all the BS that goes along with a tour like that? So it got me really charged because, you know, especially for mixing, there's a formula that I had never had to use before. And once it was over, I just couldn't wait to do it again because I'm like, oh, I know how I'll do that next time. And so for me, that was a great opportunity because I went in there and things worked out. It just shot me through a door that I never thought I'd go to. And a lot of those people never thought they'd see me coming either. But now, you know, I get these, this has all been this year. My phone is ringing for these really random stuff that I never in a million years thought my phone would ring to go mix Kanye West in Abu Dhabi. Which, that happened twice last week. I was trying to figure out how I was going to tell David I couldn't do this. But
he's right there.
Yeah, sorry. But,
I don't like no.
Yeah. I was going to send in and fill in my understudy. But anyway, but that fell through. And that too is the world I'm in now of, hey, show up, hey, go. Okay, here it is now, there it's gone. You know. It's a long-winded answer.
So this is, yeah,
it's a different
so
world.
you were mixing in front of house for those shows.
Yeah,
How many shows?
We did, well, if you count, okay, there was a benefit, which was not a full band, the Brit Awards, which was not a full band, and then 2 shows, one in Manchester, England, and one in Dublin.
Okay.
But it was a 3-week experience. It was 3 weeks.
So how close together were these things? I'm curious about 38 trucks. How long does it take to turn the show around?
You know, I honestly didn't think it was going to work. Once acts like that really get going, they're astonishingly fast. I mean, I bet I bet her people can get out of there man, I bet they get out of there in 4 hours.
38 trucks.
Yeah.
4 hours.
Because it's just, you know, for us, it's like, with Widespread, we'll go to a venue and there's 3 trucks, so we'll put 3 trucks at the dock, and it's very cool, and we get out in our time. But on those things, when it's that big, I mean, it's like, is there a sidewalk over there? Put a truck there. Is there this here? I want a truck here. I mean, it's just breaking the wall and just crazy. Seriously, because there's no other way to do it, you know, because the booking agents had given you a show 450 miles away for the next day, and it's sold out. You know, you just have to make it happen. I guess I shouldn't say you're just breaking the wall, but you see what I'm saying? You're figuring out. I mean, it was a different thing. When we were in Manchester and did that first gig, when it was over, I was so happy it was over. I walked outside, I was smoking a cigarette, and I was watching it go down, and I was looking at this parking lot where I usually would have had 2 trucks, and one waiting outside. I mean, they were just everywhere, you know. But what was crazy, when we did rehearsals in this place out in the middle of nowhere in London, nobody knew when rehearsals were going to end. Nobody knew anything. It was so chaotic because her old camp was leaving, her new camp was coming in. Nobody was really talking to anyone. It was really weird. And it was like she just got off stage at one point and just kind of cruised out the door. And about 2 hours later, the rumor went around that we were done. So everybody quit. And it was not organized at all. It blew me away. There were 6 truck docks and 38 trucks, and nobody knew what was going on. And I still don't know how they did it, because I walked outside and went to the bus and just fell asleep. You know, and I was like, I don't want to know. I don't care. I'm just mentally and physically exhausted. So shows like that, I don't know how they do it. You know, like the Rolling Stones or some of these U2, the way they do it is they have leapfrogging systems. You guys may have heard of this, but they'll have, because they have like 100 trucks. And the reason they have so much is they carry all the steel, all this massive staging, they carry all of that. But what they do is they'll have one in Chicago setting up while one's doing a show in St. Louis. And then when St. Louis tears down, they go do the show there. Well, this one's in Kansas City. And then it's yours. But that's like the big, and nowadays the economy, the way the music industry is, those acts are, I don't know who's ever going to be able to do it again, to be honest with you. I just don't. Which is sad. I feel like I missed the boat. And, you know, truly, because tours are just getting smaller and it's less money. People are spending less money on that kind of stuff. So,
who wants to do what he does? He's curious in this room because you're the obvious guy. Where are you pointing at?
I was pointing up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were pointing at Thomas Davis. Like, he wants to do this. But does anybody? I mean, if you're into this thing, ask this guy questions, because he's just kind of gone into this and gotten into some really good places, and I'm sure that doing Lady Gaga is going to probably go somewhere else too. And yeah, seriously, over there, Matt Shirley.
Did you say that you graduated from Tennessee, or did you just do that for?
well, I kind of scooted over that part.
I figured that's what you were going to say.
What happened was which I didn't do it on purpose, but I am a semester short from graduating. However, you know, the goal is to go to school to get the killer gig,
Right.
and I had the killer gig. There was not a professor there who didn't, you know, who either didn't or wouldn't have said, "Oh yeah, go for it." So no, I didn't, and I wish I had. Well, no, I don't wish I had. I wish somehow it would have worked out, you know, but it did not. But I get all these alumni letters from them now. It's just funny, you know.
Sounds like you just kind of have gone for like all your opportunities, like, you know, slept on the couch and everything. Like, do you have how do you balance that with like personal life? Do you have any time?
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, there's a lot of sacrifices that you make with touring and this and that. I will say this: one of the cool things is when I'm gone, but when I'm home, I'm home. In other words, and that's why I wanted to get away from some of the production stuff, because it was just so consuming that even when I was home, I didn't really feel like I had it. But what I mean is, you know, now that I'm just worried about audio, when I come home, I mean, I'm home all day. What do you want me to do, honey? You know, you name it, I'm home. Fortunately for me, the relationships that I've had, because I've really been doing this since I was 19, you know, more or less. I mean, I traveled, did a weekend. I worked for a wedding cover band that we would go, every weekend we'd go do something. So I've always been traveling. So all the people that I've had in my life, relationship-wise, they've never known me any other way, you know? So it's just kind of, some of the best dads in the world that I know are touring guys that tour way more than I do, you know? On the flip side of that, it's a lot of just bad relationships. So just being honest, you know, people who tour too much, in my opinion. You know, you're gone 11 months out of the year for years on end. And, you know, it's going to be tough to make it work. So I have been fortunate. Widespread doesn't really tour as much as a lot of people think they do. They did. We really don't anymore. So, but yeah, during the college years, man, I really, my main love was working. It really was. And you know, that kind of bummed me out during the process too. But I had a goal, you know. I knew I was going to get. I hoped I would get where I wanted to be, and now I'm where I want to be, and I have a beautiful wife, so it all worked out. You know. But yeah, there's a lot of sacrifices to be made, and that's a number one. So.
When you were running sound for Widespread, were you there when they started to record the live shows?
That actually started a long time ago. That was one of the things that they themselves were actually very progressive about. Two things Widespread was really on the ball about is they got into in-ear monitors and they started multi-tracking their shows in the early-ish mid-90s. So, and now I've gotten to the point where I did a lot of studio stuff in college, but I was more interested in the live stuff, and now in the past couple of years I've actually been going over to David's studio and doing some live stuff there, where we're taking some of these old recordings and trying to nurse them back to life enough to mix them, and that's a whole new field for me too. Yet to kind of really come to terms with going, this is anywhere close to as good as what I can do live, so that's a different world. But we do it now, but it's changed from when I first came around. It was all like DA-88s, DA-78s, tape, digital tape, and starting in 2005, we moved to hard disk-based recording, and now it's all on hard drives, which is way easier, way easier.
But what's the experience like for if you remembered, like, okay, I remember doing that date, I remember mixing that show, I remember being in the room, the energy in the crowd, and then going and sitting in the studio with those tracks. What's that like?
The coolest thing is the greatest thing about it, I'll say this, is that one of the biggest challenges about live events from the audio standpoint is it's all a battle of compromise, because I know exactly how I want it to sound, and I know exactly how to make it sound the way I want it to sound. But when you start getting into room acoustics and stage volume is the big one, room acoustics more so, but stage volume, suddenly your creativity is stifled. So even though you're still going to have some of those same problems that are going to leak ambiently into the microphones, when you're in the studio, suddenly I can compress this as much as I want or do anything as much as I want, and it's not going to feed back, or it's not going to cause problems or this or that. So that's what's cool to me about getting in the studio is now just really being able to. And the stuff that I've recorded and taken into the studio is, we just did the first one that I actually recorded, and it was so much easier because it was all I knew exactly what it was. Some of the older stuff is, it's just like just trying to figure out what it is, but that's been a cool, I've taken, from just a couple studio experiences I have, I've taken stuff from there and applied it already and now the lines are so blurred between the two, where the same gear is showing up in both worlds, that for me personally, one of the things that I do live is I take much more of a studio approach anyway, because screw it, I'll figure it out. It's kind of my thing, even if it's not traditional.
We were talking about Panic's front house guy that you kind of took the place of, and the character flaws that he might have had. Like, as a production manager, how do you draw that line between someone who's like really good at what they do and someone on the other side they have those flaws?
I'll tell you what, the last thing that I did in my production manager role with Widespread, before I turned it over to this other guy, was I had to make a big decision, and it was freaking awful, because I had to make, basically the way you do it is you go, okay, what am I being paid to do? And I'm watching out for the band's best interest. Also, when you're in a production manager or a tour manager kind of role, part of what you're doing is setting and maintaining a vibe for that tour as a whole. So it's my role to ensure that I don't have any troublemakers, basically, And I had to there was a group of people, all of which were my good friends, one of which is probably the best guy I've ever worked with, most talented guy I've ever worked with, and because there were problems, I had to let them go. And now it's just a mess. But I did what I thought was right. And every peer of mine, production manager, person that I know, I try not to talk about it, that it has been discussed, everybody is in agreement that it was the right thing to do. So the bottom line is, if I was to not get on someone or eventually let them go or whatever, someone that was causing problems or, just put themselves above the rest, if I didn't do that, get onto them, I would not be doing my due diligence to the task that had been, given to me. So, and that's the thing, once you get into these managerial positions, you're really asked to do, they say it's good to be king until you're, until it's not. It's cool because you go out there and you're the production manager, the tour manager, you get all the nice hotel rooms, you get all, a lot of free stuff, and everybody knows you, and you're afforded all these wonderful things. However, when the stuff hits the fan, you're the one that's left making the call. So that's the thing. On the flip side of that, that's also why they make pretty good money. I mean, to go out and do rock shows, don't always think that it's this dirty, roady thing. I mean, you make a good living doing it, but a lot of times you have to make really tough decisions. So I'm glad you brought that up. And that was one of the first ones I ever learned with that guy, because he had come from this real, heavy metal background, and it was still very attitude-y. That whole vibe is really changing now, as there's like a generational shift from the old school tough guy approach to a more, hopefully a little more friendly approach. And I didn't know how to handle him at first because I was new, and that one was a tough one. I learned a lot from that one. So, but yeah, that's making those decisions. It sucks, basically.
Asa.
What's the most outputs or channels you've handled with widespread, and how many did you have when you got that?
I think with widespread, I never really know because I haven't counted. I mean, I have it written down in an input list, but I just know them. I don't really. I think it's like of audio. With audio, I think it's in the 60s, maybe the low 70s, because we've got, a lot of times we'll have I'll have several options for one source. That doesn't mean I'm using them all at the same time. I just like to be able to, and a lot of stuff's not on, like all the percussion, I just mute and unmute. Output wise, for me at front of house, it's not really that. It's for the main system, and that gets broken up in a matrix, and then there's recording outs. Gaga was, I think, right at 70 something, because she had the way that stuff works in the R&B and I guess the hip hop and the hippity hop, and and some of these other bands like Linkin Park and some of these guys, they do it too. They'll have a band, and then they have a Pro Tools operator, and the Pro Tools operator is playing back stems. There'll be loops left and right, instruments left and right, BGVs left and right, effects left and right. But the band's playing the same thing on top of the tracks, which is really weird because you get into it and the managers and everybody else, they want to hear the tracks because the tracks are from the records, but they want to hear the band too. But they want to hear more of the track, but now I can't hear that. It's just this weird formula of how do you make that work. But anyway, with Gaga, I think it was around 70 something. So that's the coolest thing about working with widespread, is I've always said, I'm like, this is the best damn training ground ever, because there's no roadmap. It's just wide ass open, and there's a ton of stuff. And it doesn't intimidate me the least bit for someone to give me however many channels,
Katie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, how many more years do you think widespread will be touring? I have some friends that think they'll not be touring for much longer, but I kind of think they will.
Yeah, I think with an act like that, it's particularly when you get to guys like Panic, because their business model is like the anti-business model. It's their own deal, and I respect them to the nth for doing things the way they do. They've never really done anything else, They're not like the kind of guys, the artists that are in a band for 4 years and they go sit in the Hollywood Hills for the next 20. I mean, they don't do anything else. So I think, again, the market's different now. The touring market is it's really rough trying to predict things. I put it this way. I think they're going to go until they drop them. That's what I think, and I love them for that, I think it's great.
I have a question for you regarding the Pepsi Center show in December. I was just wondering, as far as crew goes, how you guys handle the one-offs and stuff.
The one-offs, what we do, and it's funny, whenever there's a one-off, management always comes back with this notion. It's like we've never done a show before. They're like, like, oh, well, it's just one, so we don't have to take but half the people, right? I'm like, yeah, but it's still the same amount of shit, you know? I mean, we still have to fit it all in, you know? So I'll take everybody. We'll take every last. What we do, in fact, if it's a one-off that's a little bigger, like the arena stuff, because we do arenas, but we're kind of the kings of like the arena that was built in 1954 in Des Moines. You know, it's like Pepsi Centers and Phillips Arenas aren't our normal deal. So when we go in there, we take more. We'll actually take an extra audio guy, and we'll bring in an extra lighting guy or two. And these are just setup guys, you know. So, and then sometimes if there's a set involved, that adds a whole other aspect. And well, you know what? And for those shows, we'll do like confetti and some of that kind of stuff for the New Year's festive vibe. So then we have to bring in 3 guys to handle all of that. So now, on the other hand, if we were just going, if it was in the middle of the summer and we were going to do a festival wherever, we do take less guys because we're not hanging our own PA. Because we'll use the festival PA, but we'll bring our consoles and our own backline and all our own mics and stuff. So we do bring less guys. We don't hang our own lighting rig, we don't hang our own PA. So on those gigs, we really do bring less people, and management gets a big kick out of that. So.
Were you there for Panic in the Streets?
I wasn't working for him then.
Okay.
I worked for him in '95, and then I went back to school, and then came for school and work. I really do say 50-50 because that's the way it worked for me. It's 100%, but that's how it was built. But and I came back in 2000, so I wasn't part of that.
Man. I have a couple follow-up questions actually. I listened to a lot of bands, not Widespread in particular, but sort of in that vein, and I've noticed just some really awesome sound guys. Like, it's just something that I think about all the time during shows. It's like, just, you know, shows that have a special amount of clarity to them, sort of active equalization and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of sound guys that move around venues a lot.
Right.
And what is your, I know now you probably just go straight to it, but what would you recommend doing to sort of identify which pitches are extremely resonant?
Yeah. Well, the main thing, well, first of all, it just goes back to what I said at the beginning. You just get involved, and that means if you're at a club with your band and you're there a few minutes early, and the guy's going through the wedges, go through them with them, and you'll learn how to call frequencies. Something real big for me when I lived here in town, I remember I had a 10-band Yamaha EQ, and the way I thought of it was 125, 63 hertz was the kick, 125 was the bass, and 250 was the mud. You know, I learned it that way, and now I identified them with instrument ranges. And then as time went on, I learned. I still, to this day, I have 31, the 31 ISO octave, third octave, 31 frequencies. I still listen to the tones. I have them on like iTunes now. I'll just put them on random and try to call them, you know. There's ear training CDs out there. There's one called Golden Ears. But it's really just repetitive practice, you know. Now with software so cheap or free, you know, where you can get an EQ, have access to an EQ, and you can turn something up and just sweep it randomly, and then open your eyes and look what that frequency is that you landed on. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of?
For sure.
Yeah, just look at EQs, play with EQs, and learn frequencies.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to do a lot of adjustments night to night just to match the rhythm.
Well, what we do, the way it works in touring is the ideal situation is for what I have on my console, my mix should theoretically never, ever, ever, ever change from night to night. Because when we take the system into the room, I'm going to tune the system to match the room to give me the same sound that I heard yesterday. And the way that I do that now, I'm really big into system tuning, because what that does is that you're talking about a lot of really good mixes. They probably have their PA tuned really, really well.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then you're just reinventing the wheel every day. Because then you're going to go to all your channels and tweak those out. Well, if I've got a consistent palette every day, then I shouldn't have to do that. The real world doesn't really allow it to work quite that well, but pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. So that's how you maintain consistency. and that's how a lot of these guys have good shows. Of course, it all comes down to the source. You know, if the band can play, it's going to be a lot easier to make it sound good. You know.
Was it frightening mixing on the Metallica tour with Randy Bonnaroo?
It's awesome. It was awesome. Man, I've had the best. That, in fact, the company that does Bonnaroo is the company that we use. I've had two of the best shows in my life at Bonnaroo, because Bonnaroo's great, because I was talking about your creative, abilities being somewhat stifled by acoustics. Well, when you're outside, unless the wind's blowing, if the wind's blowing, you're in trouble, because then it's just, and it's because there's different, the wind changes the temperature throughout its path, and sound travels at different speeds throughout those temperatures, and it's just this big phasey effect. But you know, if you're in a big field and the wind is still, it's just like having a pair of studio monitors. You know, Bonnaroo, when you've got 70,000 people, you've got a ton of subs and just power. I mean, that's from all BS that I might mention that goes on. There is no bigger rush in my life than, you know, sitting behind a console when you're driving, you know, and there's all that energy, you know. And I look around a lot to look at the crowd. Everybody's having a good time, and you know that it sounds really good, you know. And nothing sucks worse, too, than going in there with the same ability the very next day and ending up in some bathtub of an arena, and it just sounds awful, and you're embarrassed, and you're mad, you know, and that's so. But it's worth it for me, you know.
What's the best sounding arena that you've been to?
You know, I like these new big arenas, like Phillips and stuff. Believe it or not, those things can sound really, really good if it's got to be full of people. Like if concerts sounded as bad as they sound without people in the rooms, I would not do this for a living, because I don't even like sound checks, because the rooms sound awful. Even a good room sounds awful to my ears with nobody in it. But I kind of like these new arenas. I think they sound good. There's a bunch of theaters. Some theaters are completely inappropriate for amplified music because they were made for, you know, a play to be heard at the top of a balcony 200 feet away, spoken. So when you put a bunch of instruments in there, it's just a mess. But some theaters really do translate well for rock and roll. I know there's this one down in Jacksonville I've only been to one time. It's called the Moran Theater. It sounds amazing. When everybody asks me, what's a good sounding theater, I always think of that one. Chicago Theater sounds really good. That place sounds great.
Well, I had two questions. That actually basically answered my question. But I heard a rumor that they might play 10-year anniversary Panic in the Streets for a 3-day show at Classic Center.
I think you're kind of close. First of all, that anniversary would have been 3 years ago, okay. So we missed the boat on that one. What it is they're coming up on their 25th anniversary. So there's nothing set in stone, but I don't think it's any huge secret to think that they would contemplate doing a gig here, or maybe in Atlanta, or somewhere in the area to coincide with that. So, but as of right now, is there any gig? No. So.
Asa?
Is there like one mistake that like you like seems pretty repetitive amongst like other sound engineers that like is easy to fall under?
I'll say this about any mistake. The biggest lessons that I have learned, and will continue to learn, like really some of the best things that have ever happened to me are the mistakes I made. Like one of the best things that you can do, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but is to F up. You know, really, it's just to find yourself, because you'll never do it again, you know. And no, I don't know what, I think nowadays there's this like kick drum syndrome. First of all, in live mixes, where the kick drum's like 80 times louder than everything. That seems to be a common problem. But other than that, I don't know, buried vocals maybe, or inappropriately loud, which that's tough, because I like to mix really aggressively, and it's super impressive when it works, but it feels kind of inappropriate when it doesn't. So sometimes I'll fall into that category. Other than that, yeah, I don't know. The hardest thing with live mixing is really to establish a static mix. Like anybody can turn a solo up loud. That's because it's an obvious moment. What's tough, and it's because of room acoustics again, is to create that static mix where you can just hear everybody just doing enough. That's really hard, you know. And it's really hard because you might have that coming out of the desk, but if the PA is not married properly to the room, it's not going to translate. So, I didn't really answer that one. But on topic of mistakes, that's the best thing you'll ever do. It's the best thing you will ever do is make a mistake. Right.
I was gonna ask if you'd ever done any work in Athens before, like.
In Athens?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I've done all the clubs around here, you know. And you know, you can take the skill set that I have somehow gathered, and you don't have to do it on the road. You know, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, but you're not interested in going on the road, there are people at the local level that do, you know, local production guys. You can work for the promoter. You can be that promoter rep I was talking about early on. House guys at venues, local sound companies. There's a lot of ways to do these things local and not go on the road. So, and I know a lot of people that do that too. You know.
Question about Lopez, TM. I just want to get your humble opinion about him. I just met him not too long ago at the Alpharetta shows, and I was curious how you. I know you guys have been working together for a while. So
He's
how do you?
awesome.
Yeah.
He's awesome. It's a good guy he's talking about is Steve Lopez. Steve Lopez is a peer of mine who I really respect because Steve did it the way that really a lot of us did it. You're going to hear this story a lot, and I don't mean just guys involved with road stuff or this and that. I mean in any sort of avenue here. I mean, he worked in vans. He slept on floors. He did all work for free. You know, and he did all of that. When he came on with us with Widespread, he was like basically a production assistant. I mean, he was the make it happen guy. He was the guy that was like, the percussion player wants a Whopper, Burger King closed at 11, make it happen. You know, and he'd make it happen. And for that reason, he's great. I love him. He's really cool. Now, was he cool when you met him?
Yeah, he's just like you said. He's very cut and dry. Black.
He's very on. But the thing is, you know, what's funny is a lot of times if you'll meet people on the road when they're in gig mode,
right.
If you had told me he wasn't cool, I would not have been like, oh my God. You know, I'd been like, you were either in the way or it was just a bad moment. You know, because what happens is you get where our work environment is everybody else's best time. Like the number one time out of the year that they're going to go lose their mind is my work, is my office. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of times it's tough to kind of, you know, keep your composure without getting sort of. And with Steve, one of his roles is dealing with all the band's guests. And again, that's an area that I don't want to be involved in, but that person has to exist. You know, so he deals with a lot of that, and he'll deal with a lot of, you know. So if he was cool, that's good. Because he is a really cool guy. He's great. He's excellent at what he does. Right. He just went and spoke at the Billboard or Polestar or some convention up in New York, actually. So.
Anybody else? Anything final?
I have one. Did Sonny really want him to get a Whopper for him?
Man, Sonny, he doesn't like onions is a big thing. That guy, if we're at a festival, he'll literally sit in the production office going, man, I want a corn dog. So, funnel cake would be good. I mean, he puts these people through hell. So yes, he's way into the Whopper. That's his thing.
Good. Well, Chris Rabold, thanks so much. That is us. Awesome. There's probably
Thanks, guys.
Questions coming at you.
What time did you roll in? Yeah. So you're worn out. You can start tomorrow.
No, I'm getting warmed up. What I did is I put that deer
of my stuff up there. Oh yeah,
Set up the playground and go down and listen to his and then I'll like come off tonight when I get done. And anyway, went to black.
You want me to hit this?